Hey guys, I'm Nashwa. Welcome back to my channel. This video will be a wrap up because between June and July, I read a significant amount of books and I thought I'd talk about them. So right now it's 1:05 in the morning and I have way too much energy to go to bed. And if you're wondering why I'm up at this hour, like what is time, right? Ever since the quarantine began, time does not exist and time is not real. So between June and July, I read a total of 9 books. 4 of those books are for the Jane Austen July Readathon, which I participated in, and I kind of won because I don't stick to TBRs except for that one time where I did. So these are 4 Jane Austen books that I will be talking about in a separate video. So anyway, in this video I will be talking about 5 books. 2 of them are non-fiction, 2 of them are by a Pakistani author, Bapsi Sidhwa. I've lined her books up here, and one of them is a young adult novel. So I'm going to start with Open Season by Ben Crump, which is the first book out of the lot that I finished. And Open Season basically popped up on my radar after the murder of George Floyd, when the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests started, which are still ongoing. They're just not being reported. So I leave the creators who are more informed about this than me in the description box below in case you're interested in checking out the resources, because I feel I'm not the right person to talk about this, but I did read the book and I just thought that I'd share my thoughts about it. So if you see me looking down, it's either because of my notebook where I made my notes, or it's because of my laptop. So starting with Open Season, I listened to this as an audiobook, which is available on Scribd. And Ben Crump was reported to be George Floyd's family's lawyer, so he's basically taken on the case of George Floyd. In this book, Ben Crump basically argues that just because you're killing black people in small numbers, by the ones, by the twos, by the threes, does not mean it's less of a genocide. He basically says that the police are killing us, but we are also being killed by the judges and the prosecutors in the courtroom. America is built on violence and condones arming its people. Healthcare facilities are also complicit in this. He also argues that racism is systemic. It's not the instance of a few bad apples, but a system designed to maintain white supremacy. And this system of racism is so deeply embedded that a person of color, whether he is black or brown, cannot in any way fight it. He basically makes his argument case by case because he is a lawyer, and it's a very effective way of sharing the information, and he talks about a lot of different things. So the first thing that he talks about is how black children are treated differently from white children, because black children like Tamir Rice, who was a 12-year-old boy, he was shot in 2 seconds, and white shooters, who are often like young, between teenage to early 20s, like young men in most cases, are taken alive. And if a black boy has not committed a crime, he's shot dead in 2 seconds, then why is a white shooter who has killed people with the intent to kill them being taken alive? And he talks about this example of this one time where a shooter was not only taken alive, but he was taken to Burger King because he said he was hungry. So he says that a lot of this liberty is definitely not offered to black people. And then one of the arguments that he makes is fear is something that can exonerate cops, because they often claim to be in fear for their life, as it's quoted in the book. Because a lot of the time these police officers kill young men, young women, and it's only because they think they're in fear for their life, which, if you argue in a courtroom, is something that's beyond ridiculous. That how is an unarmed 12-year-old boy or a 17-year-old boy who is walking away from you making you in fear for your life? And he talks about that a lot of this footage is unreleased. It's only a few cases like George Floyd's and a few other that are basically made and shared public information, but otherwise they're usually like the footage is unreleased. One of the most interesting things that I learned from this book was the Stand Your Ground laws, which are basically laws designed to protect white shooters who are not in dangers, as opposed to black men who are. And then he gives the example of Trayvon Martin, who was a 17-year-old boy, and he was walking home in his hoodie. He had bought like some Skittles and an iced tea or some sort of a snack, and he was on his way home, and the neighborhood watch, I believe, gunned him down because, again, he was in fear for his life. He then says that the president is passing laws which are criminalizing people, and there was a man arrested, a black man arrested for wearing baggy pants, and he was beaten and tased by the police while 6 other people watched. And then he talks about the opium crisis, which I thought was one of the most interesting thing, in the sense that when black people are caught for selling drugs, they are drug dealers. This is, something that they do. This is how they live. Black people, usually are arrested for possessing cocaine or crack cocaine because it's cheaper, and it's basically being used to criminalize them. Meanwhile, white people who are addicted to opium are being treated as if they need medical help. So opium crisis in white people was treated as a health emergency, while crack marijuana, which is mostly used by black people, was used to criminalize them, and not only limited to black people but also brown people. And then he talks about voter suppression, education, the lack of opportunity in poor areas. Kids as young as 4 were being suspended because black kids are somehow seen as less innocent, and if they misbehave in school, kids as young as 4 years old, if they misbehave or throw a tantrum, they're basically suspended from school, as opposed to their white counterparts, which are basically given a slap on the wrist. And I mean, they're 4 years old, they're kids, nobody should be punished. So black kids are constantly being treated very, very differently and given harsher punishment. He also argues that the sanctity, again in quotes, the sanctity of white women is something that is used to criminalize young black men. He talks about the example of his own 13-year-old nephew, and he on the playground, I think he kissed a girl on the cheek or touched her on some part of the body. I can't really remember what it was, but basically the girl complained and the parents got involved, and they wanted to file a case or press charges for sexual harassment. And then Ben Crump, because he was the uncle, he got involved and got the charges dismissed, but it almost felt like he was begging his slave masters for his nephew's life. And it's basically a topic that he has dealt with on a very personal level because of his own nephew. He talks about environmental racism, which is dumping waste in black populated areas, and he talks about voter suppression, and that's a whole chapter. So I think that's the most justice I can do at this point, because that's how many notes I made. But I absolutely loved this book. I gave this 5 stars because it taught me so much. And of course you hear of racism in America and it's very prevalent, but when it's presented to you case by case, it's absolutely heartbreaking. But one of the reasons I liked it so much was because of how much I learned from it. And again, it's incredibly relevant, and I liked it from like a very political point of view. I like to know things about the world. I really like to get into the laws of how it is and what really happened. But I feel like if you're someone in the US, this book would benefit you a lot more. The next book I'm going to talk about is Redemption Song, Muhammad Ali and the Spirit of the 60s by Mike Marcuse, and I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing the name right. And again, this was a book that I picked up because I'm interested in reading about celebrities who have passed away, aka dead celebrities. I gave this book 5 stars, and I marked it very heavily because every sentence that I thought taught me something, I definitely marked. So I'm going to put the book down and insert a picture here so you can read the name of the author as well while I read what I wrote on Goodreads about it, because I feel like that's a better way of communicating information as opposed to my incoherent rambling. I think it's better that I read off the thoughts that I initially wrote. So my first thought when reading this book was that a non-fiction book is good when you are like, how did I not know this? And it challenges you beyond the scope of the book. If you're looking for a book that specifically focuses on Muhammad Ali's fight inside the ring and a match by match analysis of it, this one is definitely not the right one because it talks more about the politics of it. So not only does this book discuss Ali's defiance to the war in Vietnam, but it also discusses his change of religion and name, his allegiance to the Nation of Islam, his falling out with Malcolm X, and being a global icon by standing in solidarity with the people of Vietnam. And at the time, it was a very politically charged decision because he was very eligible. He was 24 years old when he first got drafted, and then he refused to go, and he basically said that I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. And I said it in the most uncool way possible. Like, I probably sound pathetic, but this is the line that he said. And this is something that basically made him really popular among the masses, especially because there was a lot of opposition to the war in Vietnam anyway. He talks about his affiliation with the people of Zaire, which is the Democratic Republic of the Congo now. And one of the things that I really liked about was the fact that I knew nothing about the Nation of Islam, absolutely nothing. I have a vague idea of who Malcolm X was, but I wasn't sure what his role in the civil rights movement was. And because this book made me so curious, I'm also currently in the middle of, I shouldn't say in the middle actually, I'm 13 pages into this, but it made me interested in this because again, those are information gaps that my education did not give me. It made me very, very curious. This book views his decision not to join the war in Vietnam from a very political lens, how he was basically stripped of his titles, his championship, and he spent 3.5 years without any permission to fight again, and he was basically, an attempt was made to turn him into a nobody, except that he became one of the most popular figures in the world, not only in the United States but all over the world. It also discusses his treatment by the American press and politicians alike, and how attitudes changed towards him once he returned to the ring after a 3-year ban, especially as he was close to being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Another reason that I really liked this book was because not only does it talk about Muhammad Ali and the politics of the 60s, the war in Vietnam, his global significance, which is already a lot, but the book also talks about the history of boxing as a sport, because it was used as a mechanism of prize fighting. Black people were inducted into the sport to win money for their white sponsors. Basically, white people hired black people to make money for them. And he talks about different athletes who went different ways, like some of them were very defiant and the press treated them really badly, but the ones who made an attempt to, fit into the system were then eventually called Uncle Toms, who were subservient to the white people. And again, some of them were not treated any better because, they were always seen as inferior. The book also talks about different musicians who took a stand during the war in Vietnam, and about a black musician called Sam Cooke. And I always knew the song A Change Is Gonna Come, but I didn't know Sam Cooke's history. And it talks about Bob Dylan and his role in the Vietnam War, how like Ali and him were going different ways when the war in Vietnam started. So again, I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was a very, very important book in terms of the current situation, but I'm always curious about like celebrities in general. But this one I really liked. I think you should pick it up because there's a lot in it. And the thing is, it's not even that long. The total book without the references is about 314 pages, which is not much at all. Now moving on to fiction, the next book I'm going to talk about is An American Brat by Bapsi Sidhwa. I'm not a fan of this cover, but basically Bapsi Sidhwa is quickly becoming one of my favorite Pakistani writers of all time, and I'm slowly going through her work. So this story is basically set in the late 70s, and that's the time when we had 2 major political changes. We had a leader who had more socialist policies, very much loved by the people, and he was replaced by someone who started the process of Islamization, in the sense that the process of really religious fundamentalism started to start during his time. So against that background, the new Islamization leader is in the scene. His name was General Zia, and Pakistan has started to become really, really conservative during that time, like super conservative beyond what Pakistanis were used to, because before that Pakistan was a fairly liberal country. Against this backdrop, there is a 17-year-old Parsi girl, and her parents are becoming really, really concerned because she is growing up to be very, very fundamentalist. She is opposing the way that her mother dresses in sleeveless saris, and her mother fears that this will affect her in more ways than one. And she basically decides to send her daughter to the US to spend time with her uncle, who is 6 years older than her. So there's not much age difference between her uncle and her. If she's 16, he is 22. And when she goes there, it opens a new world to her, and it's just about her experiences. Then she ends up going to university there, and the story just develops from there. So don't judge me, I actually do write in my books, and regarding this I have written that Bapsi Sidhwa educates and entertains us at the same time, because she is telling us about the political environment, which I think she has a very, very astute eye for. Like, she has lived through it, and she describes it in a way that nobody ever has pointed out those political movements to me. It is an interesting insight into historical and political context while delivering a quality family drama. So it is a quality family drama because we get Bapsi Sidhwa's classic humor, where there's the grandmother, the mom and the daughter, and they're just deciding what to do with this 17-year-old girl. And it raises the questions about identity and the role that one plays in the society. So because it's about a girl who is moving to the US from a fairly conservative state, how she deals with the world around her. Additionally, this book is different from Bapsi Sidhwa's other works, but not bad by any means. I gave this book 4 stars, and it is a very engaging story, but it had a calmer vibe to it than the more politically charged Cracking India, or as it's called in Pakistan, Ice Candy Man. One of the things that I absolutely loved about this book was that the characters in this book are descendants of the family from the Crow Eaters. I recently got this edition, which I'm really happy with, but this is set at the turn of the century, like early 1900s, and this is set in 1978. So the characters in this are basically the great grandparents of the 17-year-old character, which I thought was a wonderful link. Things that I absolutely loved about that book was it had like a staying power because it resonates with you. And me being a Pakistani person who has never identified or saw herself in any book, let alone a book by a Parsi author, I think it does like have a staying power. So after we finished that, I was feeling very slumpy and I wanted to read another Bapsi Sidhwa book, but I'm buddy reading The Pakistani Bride with Jo Smith later on, so I couldn't really get to that one. But I decided to cheat, and I feel like I'm cheating on Jo when I start reading Bapsi Sidhwa without her, but I think she's forgiven me. Basically, Bapsi Sidhwa's collection of short stories, it's called Their Language of Love. And one of the stories is directly lifted from this particular book, and that's something that I really wasn't expecting, but I was like, sure, it's a short story. If you haven't read that, there's one in here. It'll give you an idea of what that is about. Essentially, this book was a very strange reading experience for me because the first half of it didn't really grab my attention at all. I was like, these stories are fine, they're not that great, they seem repetitive. Then I got to the second last story called Sehra Bai, and it was basically about a mother's and her daughter's relationship, like an aging parent and how the daughter deals with it. And it just resonated with me a lot, and I felt very emotional during it. And then I got to the last story, which was partition related, and that basically cemented my belief that Bapsi Sidhwa is probably the best writer in Pakistan that I've read who has talked about partition. The last story in this book is actually based on someone that Bapsi Sidhwa knew in real life, and it was someone whose village was basically attacked by the Sikh people. Like they came, they killed everyone in the village, and somehow he survived, and he had a scar on the back of his head. So she probably in all likelihood added like more fictional detail and dramatized the story a little bit. But Bapsi Sidhwa humanizes the partition. She basically makes it look like the Hindus are people, the Sikh are people, the Muslims are people, all the minorities who are involved are actually people instead of like large groups of people. And that is something that I absolutely love about her writing. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I absolutely loved it. Despite the fact that I didn't think the first section was great, the last 2 stories really like won me over. And the last book that I read is called Clap When You Land. It's a young adult novel written by Elizabeth Acevedo, and it's written in verse. And Elizabeth Acevedo is a writer that I really like. I read The Poet X last year, and again it resonated with me. It had a staying power. So this story is about 2 half sisters. One of them lives in the Dominican Republic, the other one lives in New York City, and they do not know of each other's existence, but they're half sisters, and their father basically dies in a plane crash, and they are basically left to deal with the consequences of his death, with the grief, with the loneliness, with the seclusion, because the one in New York lives with her mother, the daughter in New York called Yohaira, her mom's alive, and the one in Dominican Republic whose name is Camino, I believe, she lives with her aunt, and she is basically living in considerable poverty as opposed to her sister who lives in New York City with her mother. So this story essentially brings the topic of grief to the forefront, because how are these 2 very, very different girls dealing with the death of their father? It talks about a lot of different themes of, you know, girls being harassed on the street, whether it's in New York or whether it's in the Dominican Republic, and essentially it's a very heartwarming story. It's something that I really, really enjoyed. And recently, I think it was in May, there was a plane crash that happened in Pakistan, and you know, I've constantly been thinking of that because I think of the people on that plane. I don't think of this like big corporate airline that went down, because essentially it's about like people dying. So that's why this story I think resonated with me more, because that tragedy was kind of fresh in my mind when I read this book. So I gave this book 4 stars. I really liked it, and I'm looking forward to read that book. I can't remember the name, but the cover is in my mind, because that's one of the Elizabeth Acevedo books that I haven't read yet. So now I've been talking at a stretch for 30 minutes. Hopefully I've tired myself enough to go to bed. If you have any comments about any of the books that I read, please feel free to let me know. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.